You're listening to the Scaling Wellness Podcast, the podcast dedicated to sharing the what, why, and how of scaling your wellness practice, as well as sharing inspiring stories of how others did it themselves. I'm your host, DJ Turner, author, agency owner, houseplant lover, and your go-to guy for scaling your wellness practice. If you're looking for tips on how to grow your team, book more clients, and get out of the day-to-day in your practice, you've come to the right place. Now sit back, relax, and let's get into the episode. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Scaling Wellness Podcast. Today, we're going to dive into the inspiring journey of Nicole Miller, the determined owner of Miller Massage, a boutique day spa in Surprise, Arizona. So I really love on her website, Nicole says as a child, she used to massage her grandmother's feet every night in exchange for Jell-O, and that being the start of her career. And I really love getting to dive into the story of how she built her place. You know, this is an interview that we recorded a long time ago from the day that it's published. Some of those things that I mentioned in previous episodes, I ended up with this massive back catalog of episodes that I unintentionally did not publish, and I'm so happy to get these out. And in this episode, Nicole and I, we sit down as she reflects back on what was it like during the pandemic, losing clients, starting over, also expanding the business, and also just in general, the process of going from a solo practitioner to managing and growing a team. She talks about what are some of the things that she has to do that you can really learn from to like manage a business when it comes to handling the finances, and also the decision about independent contractors and switching them from W-2 employees, something that I want to explore more just on the Scaling Wellness Podcast in general, because I think it's something that people don't talk about a lot, and I'm so glad I asked her about it. And we just talk about, just like realities of running a small business and what it actually takes, and some of the things that have helped Nicole, some of the mistakes that she's made, and some of the things that she's really learned from as she's gone and she's built her team. So this is a really fun conversation. I think you're going to learn a lot. Without any further ado, here's my conversation with Nicole Miller. So thanks for joining me here today. One of the first things I want to do is get some context for everyone. So can you describe your business as is today? The team, the space, the services, and really just what Miller Massage is all about.
Yeah. So we are currently in a day spa space, about, I want to say like 2,000 square feet. We're really small. We've only got 4 rooms, and one of them is like a tiled wet room. So we do facials, massages, body treatments with Vichy showers. And we're the only day spa that I know of on our side of town that has those services. We're a team of 11, including myself, all female run and owned. We're kind of tucked away inside this community in Sun City Grand. It's an active adult community, but the spa itself is open to the public. So it takes a lot to let people know that we're there, especially during our off season when, the snowbirds or the seasonal visitors leave.
So I like to also talk about the people as well. So I want to turn back time a little bit, and we think about that maybe late middle school, early high school, this like 13 to 15-year-old Nicole. Who were you like at that time? What were you interested in?
13 to 15-year-old Nicole. I think I was kind of trying to find myself, but still trying to fit in. And I was kind of in a hurry to grow up. I just remember playing like the driving video games and like, I'm going to learn how to drive and drive as soon as I can. And I think I got my first job at like 15 working at a pizza place because I was just adamant that I was going to be driving by the time I turned 16. And I was driving my older brother around for many years. And I just was ready to grow up, I think, a little too fast. So if I could go back and tell 13-year-old Nicole, 15-year-old Nicole, like I'd say, slow down because adulting's rough.
And so what was it that led you into massage in the first place?
Yeah, so I was living in California, and if you've ever lived out there, it's a struggle bus. It's expensive to live, and I felt like I was just living paycheck to paycheck. And I remember seeing a girl from high school, shout out to Carly. She was like going on trips, and she lived in California too. She was going on trips, and it seemed like she was always posting like she was at the river, and she was like living her best life. And I wanted to know how she was affording to be able to do that. And I remember reaching out to her and, like asking her what she did for work. And she said she was a massage therapist, and got some more information on her schooling and where she went. And I remember running it past my grandparents, and my aunt had actually years prior taken, she had got her license in massage therapy, and she just never really did anything with it and went a different route in life. So my family wasn't really sold on that industry or that career choice. And I thought, well, I'm going to do it anyway. Worst case scenario, I'm getting a free massage every day. And I remember I used to rub my great grandmother's feet, and she really enjoyed it. So maybe I had some kind of a skill to it. And in my mind, I was going to be working 40 hours a week or more, and I was going to be charging $60 an hour. And so I was going to be making all of this money. And you get into school and you realize that that's not realistic, that your body can't necessarily handle that 40-hour workload like a normal, other industry might be able to accommodate. And so it was kind of a reality check when you actually get hands-on and start school, and you feel like, oh my God, my body is not going to be able to handle this long term. And I'm glad that I kept with it, because that stuff kind of goes away and you build up your muscle tone, and those feelings like your body's not going to make it go away for most people.
And so you're in massage school, and I want to kind of connect the pieces of what starts to happen next. I think every massage therapist, they have a decision of, do I want to be employed somewhere and stay employed? Do I want to start a business right away? Do I want to employ, then start a business? Just how did the vision for Miller Massage first start to come about? Did you know from day one you're going to be working for yourself?
I think I always knew I would end up there, but when I was in massage school, I was like planning on either going to Las Vegas or Hawaii or working on a cruise ship. I was going to travel and take my license and do something with it. And it was funny because the day that I graduated massage school, I found out that I was pregnant with my son. And so it was like and I was facing being a single mom. So it was a big life decision that I had to kind of figure out what I was going to do. And so I got a job at a chiropractic office while I was still in school. And I remember needing to take time off to go to doctor's appointments. And they called me into the office after my first doctor's appointment, the chiropractic did. And they said, well, we heard of your good news, but we're going to go ahead and call today your last day. And they cut me a check and fired me on the spot. It's the only time I've ever been fired. And I left there, and I was able to go and get another job like immediately at a day spa space. And so I worked there up until I was about to have my son, and my management of my apartment complex calls me and says, we need everybody on your half of the complex to move. We have a huge plumbing problem. We don't know how long it's going to take. And I was like, okay, where can you guys put me then? I'm like 3 weeks from giving birth. I can't physically move anything. What can we do? And they didn't have any apartments for me, and I didn't have any money saved on the fly like that to be able to move. So I deliver, and I find myself homeless, and not by choice. And so I have 4 dogs, and in my belief, I don't rehome my pets. And so it wasn't like I could just move in with family. And I knew people in Arizona, and I was able to find an apartment that was like $100 deposit. And so I packed my dogs and my 2-week-old baby, and we took a journey out to Arizona, and I found the day spa that I'm currently working in. And it was really, really great. It was very busy during peak season, but during the summertime, I might go in for 1 appointment a week, and they might not show up, and I might not get paid for that time because I was a misclassified independent contractor. It was tough. I would go sometimes to California to work, and I did this off and on struggle where it was like busy and then slow, busy and slow. And then 4 or 5 years in, I just couldn't do it anymore. I had a mental snap in the beginning of slow season, and I went to my boss and I said, I think this is going to be my last 2 weeks here. I am ready to start my own something. And she was just really adamant about, I don't think you should do it, the overhead, and just really selling the idea of sticking with the spa, and I just was like mentally ready to go. And I did. And I had a non-compete clause I wanted to respect. And I left with no clients, nothing on the books, no space to go to, but just I was hungry and ready to do something else. And so I found a little salon suite and rented that and borrowed some money for my startup costs from a relative, my grandparents, and just really probably had no business starting a business at that time, but I was just determined I was gonna make it work.
And I mean, that is just a fascinating story of how much you've gone through to get to be able to start that business. It's really easy to look at how things are today and say like, wow, it's amazing. We've got 4 rooms and a large staff. I want to look at that first year of business. So you have no clients, you find a space, you've kind of quit right away and gone straight into you have your own business. What did that first year look like when it was just you?
Yeah. So it was a lot of learning experiences from the moment that I signed the lease on this little salon suite. My mind thought that I was going to be able to just go and get a business license right away and to get, all the things that I needed to be legal in a business right away. And that doesn't always happen. The city that I'm in particularly, they are really difficult to work with at times when it comes to being a business owner and trying to get a business license. Even if you've had one with them and you switch locations, you go through this process all over again. So what I thought was going to be, I walk in and walk out with it, turned out to be like a 2-month long wait that I was not able to work, that I was paying for this suite. So I ended up getting a job at some other mini chain around here. And I was working, finally able to get my license through. But before that, I left a clipboard outside of my suite. And it had a little thing saying, coming soon, put your email and your phone number for a free 30-minute upgrade when we open, and we'll give you a call when we open. And I came back 2 months later, and it was like 6 pages front and back. And so I had a really good starting list of people that I was going to be cold calling, and not so much a cold call because they signed up for it, but I had 6 pages that I was able to work with. I was in a salon suite, so there was 41 other suites. And so I had 41 other opportunities, plus their clients that might be in with them getting a haircut or whatever. So that could be like 82 opportunities. So I was passing out flyers. I was going door to door to local businesses and introducing myself. And it was funny because I remember having my paper and pen book and thinking that that was like how I was going to run my business, that I was not going to be doing any kind of online booking because I wasn't comfortable with it. I wanted full control over my schedule. And it's comical to look back and see that book scratched out and just so messy looking because people's plans change. And I realized very early on that I needed to have an online booking platform. And my business changed dramatically when I got out of that headspace of that I can do this all myself on a paper, old-fashioned way and changed with the times. My business just changed drastically. We ended up on the first page of Google within 6 months. I became fully booked within 6 months from there and started renting out my room, and then later turned to hiring on contractors and just haven't stopped from there. We grew from 1 room to 2 rooms to a storefront and then now to our day spa.
That is really impressive. I mean, you've grown so that first year, 2017, to here we are recording in 2022. Can you walk us through, you'd mentioned, okay, so you started looking at independent contractors and having more space. Can you just walk us through the timeline of some of those things? I think it'll give us some context of what's happened in these 5 years, and then we'll kind of go back and look deeper into some of those.
Yeah. So when I started to pick up and get busy, I was kind of burning myself out. I was working some days from like 9 in the morning until 8 at night. I was there, the first person in the building and the last one to leave. And then I'd come home and I would do laundry all night long until the next day. And it was just not sustainable. And so I thought, well, I'll cut back my massage time a little bit and I'll rent my suite when I'm not in there. And so I don't remember where I posted the ad. I think I want to say on Facebook, but somebody responded, this lady, and it was kind of weird from the get-go. I said, well, let's trade massages so I can see who you are if I'm going to be sending clients over to you. And she was like, well, you just want to get a free massage. So that was like my first red flag, but I was desperate. So I brought her in anyway. And I was getting feedback from clients that she was like, bringing her, it was like just the hallway in front of our room. And she would bring her purse out with her into the hallway. And then I'm like, well, maybe she like forgot that she was holding it. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, but it was just the whole thing was weird. She gave me a really weird vibe. And so I ended up cutting ties and saying, I don't think room rental's the way I want to go. I grew to a bigger room and I got so overbooked and had people still calling that I knew I would be okay bringing in a contractor. So I brought in my first contractor. She stayed with me for quite a while before she left and started her own business. And I've had the next two contractors up until now. I think one of them just left last week. So she had been with me for 3 years now, almost 4 years. So that was a hard loss to lose somebody that you've had that long. But yeah, from having the one suite, we had the neighboring suite because we were so busy. And we thought, okay, we'll have 2 rooms. And it wasn't really cost effective in a salon suite setting. We got the opportunity to keep growing. And I took a yo massage class. And I really had the need, or I thought I had the need for a larger space that could accommodate class massage. So we ended up as a group of, I think, 4 of us at that time. I had hired on Brenda at that time as well. We went together and looked at the storefront and decided as a team that this would be a good move for us. I signed the lease and we went there with our kids and we painted and we made this space our own and just really put all our faith that this storefront was going to work. And we didn't really have neighbors around us that were compatible with the industry that we were doing. It was like a music studio for kids and insurance. So it wasn't that same foot traffic we were accommodated to, or used to. So it was a big leap, and we were slow for the first couple of weeks and couldn't figure out why it was so slow. And I'm not somebody who really watches the news. And then I turned on the news and realized that COVID happened. And it was like 2 weeks into our storefront. It was like a couple of weeks after that, we closed a week before our state closed down because we didn't really know how to navigate that at that time. And we were closed for almost 3 months. It was a bummer. I didn't have any assistance. I didn't qualify for anything because all of my staff was independent contractors. So really the whole team was just surviving on our savings or whatever other means, I don't think anybody else really got other jobs. I know towards the end of the pandemic, I finally was able to qualify for like unemployment. And we were solely relying on my husband's income to just survive and get by. I went through my savings to try to just keep the storefront open. And it was a really scary and tough time for us. And we were worried about when we reopened if we would lose a lot of clients because people were not wanting to come out. We had a lot of pushback from certain people about our mask mandates that we had at the time. And it was just scary. It was kind of a time where we were all trying to learn how to navigate our new reality, and it was like nobody was perfect in that. We probably lost some clients and we probably gained some clients. And one of my long-term clients that found me from my original day spa and had followed me ever since, he mentioned that the day spa I had worked at previously had closed down. All of their retail stuff that had been up through the pandemic was just gone. And he said, maybe you might want to ask about the space. I did ask about the space with one of the management people of the board, and they turned it into a contract 2 weeks later, and it was just like the best contract. So that's how we ended up in our current day spa space. And we ended up maintaining both spaces for quite some time, for about 6 to 9 months, and finally found somebody to take over the storefront space so we can focus solely on the day spa that just had better amenities and a better contract.
So I want to dive into how things are and a little bit about some of the changes that you've experienced as the business has grown. So with the way things are today, can you just describe the structure of the team in terms of administrative staff versus practitioners, and then if there's any leadership management going on, just what's the team like right now?
Yeah, so over the last year, we've grown tremendously. We didn't have a front desk before last year, so we moved into this day spa January of 21. We didn't have all of the staff that we had. We just had our independent contractors, and all we did was massage therapy. When we came in, I knew that we had a need for facials. And so I thought of all of my contacts, my clients that are estheticians, and I called the very first one that I can think of. And I said, hey, I have a need for estheticians. Can you help me out? And, maybe come over and take over that. And I'll be fully hands off. This will be your business run within our business. So contracting her in basically. Danielle came in and she hired her team. So she's got 2 estheticians that work underneath her that are employed by her. I have 3 front desk staff that are everybody else's employees under my business. My front desk, I have a manager, Kathy, who's like the glue that holds everything together. And she totally runs scheduling of all of the other front desk and everything from front to back. She's awesome. They're all great. So I'm blessed to have them. I have my 5 therapists, including myself, and we all alternate. And most of them have been with me they've all been with me over a year. So, yeah.
And so I wanted to ask then, at this stage, are you still seeing clients, or like how does your schedule compare, especially in the beginning when it was 100% you?
Yeah. So like I said, I just lost one of my long-term employees. So I've actually just recently in the past week or 2 gone to working a lot more massages than I was used to working. I used to still work massages 5 days a week, but I would do the second half of the day. So the first half of the day, I would do my administrative things and basically anything that needed to be done office-wise. So I do a lot of that from home, and I still massage 5 or 6 days a week. Now I'm massaging 6 days a week and still fitting in all of the administrative stuff and the marketing. I do all of my search engine optimization myself. I've taught myself how to build my website, how to do all of my marketing stuff is done by me, just self-taught, trial and error.
So one of the things I want to ask about, a business of 1 is very different than a business the size of 10. Actually, the things that I tend to see is like a business of 1 is different. Then you see a business of 3, and then like 5 to 10 is a very different business. And then like the 10 to 20 is a very different business. At this size, what are some of the things that help keep the business afloat? So we're thinking about the systems, procedures, tools, people, whatever, the things that you have put in place that keeps the business running at this size that you maybe didn't need when it was smaller.
Our needs are constantly changing. When I first started, I was obviously taking home all the laundry. When we first took over this day spa space, we have commercial washer and dryers. We didn't realize that our amount of traffic coming through was going to be as high as it was. And our capabilities of our washers and dryers were just not able to keep up. So we've had to adapt and take in laundry services. Having our online booking software is just like the best instrument in every way, from scheduling our staff, meetings, or just so they know their schedule. They can book their own appointments with clients if they're out and about talking to somebody. And we're able to really enforce our policies by having that booking software. And our front desk is really protected against people trying to argue against our policies because they're so firm in all of the placement that they are. So I think just having really firm policies that we've adapted to over the years and trying to change the mindset of, we want to just give away free services and massages. Like when I first started, it's kind of scary. I was giving away $30 an hour massages. It was like a horrible, horrible business plan. And as we're growing, we can't do that kind of stuff anymore. And I try to think of, could you get away with some of the things with Target or Massage Envy that you could get away with a small business? And so we've adopted a lot of policies and being really firm and just the mindset that we want to treat ourselves like as if we were a big corporation that didn't have a whole lot of wiggle room on those policies.
We'll be back with this episode in just a moment. But first, let me ask you a question. Does it ever feel like you're stuck on some sort of business treadmill? Despite all the hard work you put in, it feels like you aren't actually going anywhere. And at first, growing your practice and filling it with clients was everything you ever dreamed of. But now, the day-to-day of your business is starting to almost feel like a never-ending nightmare. You know you love your clients, you've maybe even built a team, and you can't imagine giving any of it up, yet at the same time, you feel like you just can't seem to escape. If that sounds like you, I want to offer you an alternative. I like to call it wellness practice freedom. It's a place where your practice gives you more than just money. When you get to this point, you're no longer the main engine in the vehicle, and instead, you finally get to act like the driver. And most importantly, you'll be in a place where you can work as little or as much as you'd like, because you know that your practice is built in a way that it can thrive without you. Sound interesting? Then I want to invite you to take the journey to achieving wellness practice freedom. During this call, we'll dive into exactly what freedom looks like for you, the changes that you need to take, and what's going to allow you to step back from your business without worrying about your income or everything falling apart. Ready to get started? Then head over to my calendar at www.scalingwellness.com/chat. Again, that's www.scalingwellness.com/chat. Now, let's get back to the episode.
And one of the things I want to ask about in somewhat of a similar vein, or made me think of this question, thinking about how much you charge and then being really strict about your policies and saying, hey, this is what we do. We treat ourselves like a big business. Massage is a place, especially with individual practitioners as they're growing, it's a place where people really struggle with this idea of like charging for others, charging for help. I see kind of there's a split, and this more so, I think anyone who's built a team, they have gotten over this hump in some way or another. But there's kind of the people who are like just tried and true entrepreneurs, and it's never an issue. I think that is a minority of massage and wellness, and more people are like, I'm here to help, I'm here to heal. And that conversation and money just really conflict in their heads. What's your relationship like with money, especially, starting your own business, but now expanding it into something that's, literally 10 times beyond just you?
Yeah, it's taken a big turn. I remember when I first started doing massage, I had a really hard time charging higher rates. And I think a lot of people in our industry have this misconception. And I totally had this when I started. I left the day spa I was working at because in my mind, this business owner is making all of this money off of me and I'm doing all of the work, right? When you're in session and your body's tired, that's your mindset. And so I left and I'm like, I'm going to work, less hours and this and that. I realized that you can't run a business. You can run a hobby by just charging or giving a bunch of free services away, but you're going to burn yourself out. That's not sustainable. And so it took a mind shift for me that this isn't a hobby for me. This is my livelihood. This is a business for me. And it was harder when I started bringing on team members because I still wanted to pay them and treat them the way that I would want to be treated. And so I probably should have hired an accountant or somebody to give me like official numbers of what I could afford. Instead, I was winging it and still continue to wing it a lot of the time and just kind of accommodate where I can to make up. But I think when I first started, I was heavily overpaying my contractors. And so when we switched over to W-2 employees, it was a big shift to the pay difference because you have to accommodate the taxes and the things that you now have to be responsible for as a business owner. And there's a really heavy undertone in our industry that they're underpaid therapists at maybe 32 an hour is underpaid to a lot of them. And there's another heavy undertone in our industry that you can only work 15 to 20 hours or we don't want to charge. It's a healing thing. Like we feel like we don't want to charge for our services because we're helping people. And some people feel like they're giving a service and other people feel like they're giving medicinal benefits. And really both are correct. It's a mindset. I think a lot of people it's easy to have that mindset of not charging when you don't have the responsibilities of really hefty overheads.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. So I love being kind of an outsider to the industry in the sense that I get to see what other people are doing. And when I hear people who like have a hard time charging when it's helping, it's like, I promise you the chiropractors are charging. As I say, as much as they can, not in a mean spirited way. Like I promise you, they are charging as much as they can. The dentists are charging as much as they can. The doctors are charging as much as they can. One, because they need to, but two, because the work that they do is worth it. One of the things you mentioned, I want to look further into. One of my goals with this podcast is to have more conversations about the higher levels of running a business. And I say higher levels about the things that happen when you run a business with a team. I think most Facebook groups and online spaces, especially in massage, are just really catered towards that one person business. And they don't talk about, for example, the switch when you're overpaying your team. This is something that we actually have clients, consulting clients come to us and they're like, hey, I'm not making any profit. And then it turns out they've got independent contractors on commission on like 75%. And it's like, I know that feels really good when you say that, but there's a reason like why you can't take any time off.
Yeah.
That's what's happening there. What was that process for you like when you switched over from independent contractors to employees? Salary had to change, expectations had to change.
Yeah.
Did everyone quit? Like, just what was that transition like?
Yeah, so it was at the time we still had both the storefront and the day spa. And so the storefront was still going to continue to not have a front desk. Everybody was still checking out their own clients at the end. So legally they could still be contractors. And I think there's a lot of misclassified employees that are classified as independent contractors for the sole benefit of the business owner. But when it comes down to tax time, you don't really have a whole lot to write off because you're not actually an independent contractor. And that's what I faced at the day spa that I left. And I actually ended up hiring one of her workers who told me that she had got called from the Department of Economic Services and that old business owner actually got cited for misclassifying her workers. So I knew going into it that when we took over that day spa space, we could not legally have them as independent contractors anymore because we have a front desk who's taking all of the payments. Unless we were all going to be splitting the cost and how messy that would be in the business model that we were going into, it just wasn't a feasible thing. Having the aesthetics team as their independent contractors, they collect their own payment and they pay for part of the front desk services and they pay rental fees. So they are actual true independent contractors. I gave my staff the choice. I said, the reality that we're facing, if you would like to work at the day spa, it's going to be W-2 switch. This is the pay. These are what I'm going to offer. So I offer health insurance. If they want to choose that, we pay for half. I offered sick paid time off up to 30 or 40 hours a year. So I offered some benefits to kind of compensate for the drop off of pay that they were going to be seeing. And if they chose to stay as independent contractors, it was going to be just a set room rental at the other place. And they would just be responsible for that set overhead, just as they were their own business owners. And they all chose to come to the day spa side, except for one who ended up moving out of state and obviously didn't work out in that storefront anymore for her. But everybody was comfortable, I think, with that change. I think over time, the energy in the spa has changed some because it's gone from me saying, I'm not your boss. You guys are your own bosses as independent contractors. I just work with you, to me actually being the boss. And I kind of hate that term. I don't like it. I'm not a fan of it.
Well, I wanted to ask about your role as owner and how it's changed as the business has grown. And this is a very common thing that I hear is people don't like this idea of being the boss or the term boss. And I think a lot of that comes from past experience of what people have had of employees and kind of what we see as what a boss is. We can change the term, but at some point there is someone who's in charge, someone who's a captain of the ship in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
How has that changed for you as the business has grown and gone through its different iterations?
It's been a big transition, I think, for me mentally to try to just accommodate that new role where I am the person that is in charge of running the whole ship. There's a lot more responsibilities that solely lie on me. So it took a lot of putting things into place and how I wanted things to be done so that there is an expectation that we all just know that this is the standard that we're going to be having here, but also giving up some freedoms and letting my team take over where they can, because I need to be able to trust my team, and I do trust my team. I'm blessed to have every single one of them. So that was the hardest thing for me, was giving up control for a lot of things that I take everything on myself, and I still take a lot of things on myself. But I say to this day, I don't know how I was doing all of this before my front desk came along, or before the team came along. I so heavily rely on each person now. It was a change.
And I want to ask, was there any point that was particularly hard? I really love looking at what are the transition points. A very obvious one is like the business of one to the first team member. But were there any things that you noticed, like there was a difference between a team of three and a team of four, or the
Yeah.
difference when you had the first manager, like any of those that come to mind?
Yeah, I think every year there is a growing stage. So my first couple of years was bringing in the contractors, and that was difficult trying to it's a roller coaster. You're like, do I have enough to pay contractors? Is there going to be enough business coming in to take care of them? What if I have a bunch of Groupons coming in and I'm only making, Groupon will screw you out of a lot of money. You don't know what you're getting till it comes in. And so I made that mistake early on of using Groupon in my first couple years. And so there was kind of a scary aspect of, am I going to be able to maintain having a team and the ebbs and flows of that? Switching over to W-2s was like a really big learning curve because I had to really navigate going on government sites and trying to figure out how to set up tax profiles and doing all of this stuff myself because I'm really hard-headed and I just don't trust a whole lot of other people to be able to handle it. I'd rather do the time and the research and just handle things, So it was a learning curve for me.
And you've just grown so much so fast. I mean, I get a chance to have lots of conversations and pay attention to what's happening with people in the industry. And I think there are people who would have taken twice, three times as long to build a business to the size that you've had. Some people who would kind of, run out of gas along the way and never really make it there. I'm curious about how you have structured growth. And I think an easy way to look at it is, I got this from storytelling and writing. There's the gardeners and they're the people they're planting seeds and tending to the garden, and maybe they don't 100% know what's going to grow, but they're watching it and saying, okay, I finally have this picture. The other side, there's the architects who sit down and they're like, I'm going to think about every single detail and then I'm going to reverse engineer and go make it happen. What's growth been like for you? Has it been hard, one or the other, something in between?
Yeah, I feel like I'm more the gardener. I planted a lot of seeds and thrown things out there to see what's worked and what's not worked and just kind of adapted to changing maybe my marketing types, or over the years, our prices have increased and just kind of getting over the hump that you might lose some people with those kinds of changes. But just trial and error. I think just every demographic and everywhere you go, one thing that works for somebody is not going to work maybe for somebody else in another area. I think I've been really lucky to be in an area that's constantly growing and it's continuing to grow. So, I mean, trajectory of business is just going to keep going up. We're in an area where people are really privy to shopping local and small businesses. And so that's really worked out in our favor as well. We are really, really good about rebooking and our rebooking scripts. And I think that's been kind of the golden ticket for maintaining clients. So we've stuck with a really good closing script and open-ended questions. It's an art form to the closing script, I think.
And there's no business or business owner that I know of that hasn't made some form of mistake, or at least had a lesson that was maybe not so fun to learn in the process. When you think about any mistakes or hard lessons that you've made or been through, are there any that stand out as being ones that you really learned a lot from?
Yeah, I've quite a few. I learn new lessons every year, but I think I would say when I first started out, not getting a really good accountant and bookkeeper to just kind of take some of that load off, because it's one of those things in my career that I don't love doing, and I'm so deep into doing it at this point that I just mentally have a hard time letting that portion go. But I think getting a good grasp on your money and your numbers, and I think in our industry, a lot of people undercut and I'm going to be the cheapest in town, and it really drives down our industry. And I think as a whole, if we all kind of got together and realized that we're worth more than $30 an hour, we're worth more than that Groupon voucher, we can really kind of change our industry and our perspective. And I think just people's perspective of our industry, that we're not a massage parlor or an actual medical building that you would come to, even if it does seem like a luxury. Lots of mistakes, from using Groupons to not really understanding my numbers when I first started, and still continuing to learn my numbers. It's ever changing.
Mhm. And actually, I have a question about the Groupon, and this is something. So, I mean, a lot of my background is in marketing. We've got a done for you agency. We guarantee results. I've spent more money in advertising than average massage therapist makes in a year. I love it. One of the things that I like talking to people about and asking about is when it comes to Groupon, or if it's not Groupon specifically, it's just the strategy of using some sort of deep discount. I think Groupon has a special place because not only are you discounting, but then Groupon takes a percentage of the discount as well. And that introduces like a whole other level of like, wait a minute, I got paid $15 for this at the end of the day. Like, that's a huge problem. My question is, I see most people talk about not using Groupon, why they shouldn't, regretting it or making it as a mistake. But I also see on the other side where people say, well, if I had to admit, I did get the first client base from Groupon and then I left it. I'm just curious for you, in the beginning, for the solo practice, giving away the free 30 minutes, using Groupon at points in the business. When you look at it, is it something that, do you think it was necessary? A thing that was kind of just to get to the next point, or something you would say, you know what, I wish we wouldn't have done it at all?
I think in hindsight, I might have done things differently, but I'm one of those rare exceptions where I actually had a really good retention rate from Groupon. So I can't knock them too hard, but I realized very early on how to use Groupon. So I realized that if I just had a campaign that was a 60, a 90-minute, or a 2-hour massage with nothing else to it, I wasn't going to make any money off of it, because they're going to make you discount your service like at least 20 to 30%. Then Groupon's going to take half of that. And sometimes they still put additional sales on top of it. So you could maybe take like $5 to $10 home. I realized really early on that I needed to inflate my cost with Groupon and my value to the person that's purchasing the campaign. So I would run campaigns that were like 60 to 2-hour options that included hot stones, hot towels, aromatherapy, reflexology, and I found a really cheap CBD lotion for like $10 that I could use as the top coat. And it was really cost effective. So by having those upgrades that didn't cost me hardly any money to no money at all, I was able to get closer to my take home with Groupon. And not to say I didn't still take a hit, because they still heavily discount on specials and other things, but I was able to get closer to a take home. I also had to deal with a lot of clients who were just deal seeking, and I didn't have strong policies in place at the time. So whenever I had a no-show or a trouble client, it was always guaranteed to be a Groupon client. And Groupon doesn't allow you to just take their voucher number and redeem it if they no-show. It's against their policies. So if you don't have your own cancellation policies, you're just out that money. So it was a lot of learning about, sometimes that's the kind of clients that you attract when you heavily discount your services. And then when you get to the point where you're starting to raise your rates, those clients, most of them are going to drop off unless you're just really like totally their style and they're willing to pay that extra money. You're not really maintain those clients, and you're kind of starting from scratch again. I think you're better off running a focused campaign on like Instagram or Facebook, where you can really determine the demographic that it's going to and kind of take it down to even their interests and people who are maybe interested in the certain keywords that you're promoting or that your key clientele might have.
So I thank you for elaborating on that. I think there's some really good advice on, as well as like how to get clients. So we've covered a lot in this conversation. I got a few more quick questions. They don't necessarily need to have quick answers. The first one, what's your current obsession? It could be personal, it could be professional, but just what's the thing lately that you can't stop thinking or want to tell others about?
Yeah, I, for a while, have been, probably since the pandemic, been obsessed with just keeping an eye on Google Flights, and I have found little tricks and tips to kind of like save lots of money and get really cheap flights. So my weird thing that I like to do is I like to take really cheap flights over a weekend and go with layovers so that I can collect Starbucks Been There series mugs. I collect mugs from different states. That's my big flex.
I would say
That's
I'm
my
not a mug I'm not a mug collector, but I'm like my people. A lot of international travel I did, especially when I was long distance with my wife, getting from the US to Switzerland. I just paid attention to whenever flights were cheap, so I could find $500 flights over to Switzerland
Yep.
and take them as often as I could. So I get that.
Yes.
Now, when you think about your own business journey or even your own personal growth journey, is there any resource, a book, a podcast, a course, a person, just something or someone that stands out as being a favorite or really helpful to you?
Yeah, I think as far as a book, the Massage MBA, I'm probably saying her last name wrong, Rachel Beidner, I think is her name. That is the best book for massage therapy. I wish I would have read that when I first was thinking about opening a business, because she really breaks down all the things I was doing when I first started and helped me understand why certain things were working and maybe sometimes why other things might not have worked. So that's a really just a Bible book. It's so good. I tell everybody about that book. And just kind of following some other massage therapists that I look up to and having some good mentors and reaching out to them and kind of seeing what works for their business and, some ideas that I might want to apply to my own.
So I want to give a second shout out to Rachel. She's been on the podcast, I think a few times. I try to include her in any events that I do because she's great. She gets the endless praise from me. And then we've had multiple other guests on the show also mention her book or opportunities where they've gotten to work with her. And really, Rachel is like fantastic. She's the first child. I finally have my book the day of this recording. I finally have my book available in hardcover. People can actually touch it. And so Rachel actually is the author and contributor of the first chapter of my book. And she breaks down like how to get clients if you have nothing. So Rachel is awesome. I just have to say.
She's great. Good job, Rachel.
And so we covered so much. Are there any final words of advice or wisdom for our listeners?
I would just say you got to have tough skin to be in our industry, I think, especially as a business owner. And it's really easy to be in there daydreaming about really big growth, but there's a lot that comes with big changes like that. And sometimes it's almost better to stay a little bit on the smaller side, because I think I was making more when it was just a small team of 3 than having a large day spa operation with this size. So it's not always what you think it is. And sometimes it's better to kind of stay humble and smaller and, grow at a smaller speed.
And so if someone wants to learn more about you, your business, or get connected with you, where's the best place for them to go?
They can go to millermassage.com, and there is a button, I believe, down towards the bottom for contact, and you can email me directly from there, and that goes straight to me.
All right. So thank you again so much. And thanks everyone watching, listening, however it is you're consuming this content. That's all for this interview. And I'll catch you guys on the next one.
The Scaling Wellness Podcast is hosted and produced by yours truly, DJ Turner. Administration, guest research, editing, and associate production by Helen C. For highlights and updates, follow us on Instagram at Scaling Wellness. And for more information on how to scale your practice up and get out of the day-to-day, head to www.scalingwellness.com.